Worry has this strange way of pretending to be responsibility. It tricks you into thinking you're being cautious, like you're keeping yourself safe, but underneath, it's just fear practicing for a future that doesn't even exist yet. And most of the time, that future never comes. It's crazy how much time we spend solving problems that only live in our imagination, running through conversations that haven't happened, preparing defenses for situations that don't exist. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, creating disaster scenarios in your mind, and you call that being prepared. But worrying isn't preparation. It's paralysis. It traps you in a cycle where your nervous system is on high alert even when nothing is actually threatening you. It doesn't make you wiser, calmer, or more in control. It just drains you. And when you finally take a step back, even for a moment, you notice how much energy has been stolen by thoughts that didn't even belong there. You start seeing the pattern. The things you stressed about last month, half of them never happened. The ones that did, you handled them, not because you worried, but because you showed up when the time came. Worry didn't help. Presence did. And here's the part that surprises most people. When you stop worrying, you don't become reckless. You become focused. You stop scattering your energy across endless what-ifs and start paying attention to what's actually in front of you. That's when everything starts to change. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you're no longer living in a future built out of fear. The weight begins to lift. You stop gripping so tightly. You give yourself permission to breathe again. Not because everything is solved, but because you've realized you don't need to suffer your way through life just to feel safe. And when that shift happens, when worry finally loses its grip, that's when everything starts to align. What most people don't see is that worry is just the brain trying to feel useful when it's scared. It's like a broken survival system, constantly scanning for danger, trying to predict every outcome, as if worrying hard enough will somehow prevent bad things from happening. But here's the truth. It's an illusion of control. Worry makes you feel like you're doing something, thinking, preparing, planning. But in reality, you're just stuck spinning your wheels, running mental laps around problems that don't even exist yet. And while you're busy obsessing over what might go wrong, life is quietly passing by. Opportunities slip through your fingers. Beautiful moments go unnoticed. Peace, connection, creativity, they're all there, but you can't see them because worry makes you blind. The real shift happens when you stop asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" and start asking, "What if I'll be okay, even if it does?" That question changes everything. Because confidence isn't built by avoiding chaos. It's built by moving through it, one steady breath at a time. It's built by realizing you can face discomfort without falling apart. That you can walk through uncertainty without losing yourself. That you don't need every answer right now. You just need to stay present enough to hear them when they show up. When you stop feeding the worry, you stop needing to predict the path. You learn to respond instead of panic. You trust that whatever comes, you'll handle it. Not perfectly, not with some flawless plan, but with clarity and calm. That's when life begins to flow differently. Conversations feel lighter. Decisions feel cleaner. Even mistakes don't hit as hard because you no longer treat every misstep as proof that everything's falling apart. You stop reacting from fear and start moving from peace. And people feel the shift. Your tone changes. Your presence changes. You're no longer broadcasting anxiety through your voice, your posture, your eyes. You move slower, but with more purpose. You speak less, but with more weight. You stop trying to control every detail and start becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to. Because your presence alone carries strength. And that's when everything around you starts shifting. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped fighting life with worry. Here's a hard truth. A lot of the problems you think you have aren't real problems. They're stories created by worry. You're not overwhelmed by your reality. You're overwhelmed by your interpretation of it, the meaning you've attached to it, the imaginary outcomes that may never happen. Worry turns small things into monsters. One unread message feels like rejection. A quiet room feels like failure. One unexpected event, and suddenly it feels like your whole day is ruined. But what if you didn't add meaning? What if you didn't rush to conclusions? What if you simply let things be what they are, without making them personal, negative, or permanent? That's when life starts to feel lighter. Not because you gained control, but because you stopped coloring everything with fear. One of the most freeing things you can do is stop narrating your life with worry. You don't need to predict every outcome. You don't need to forecast disaster. You don't need to overplan for every possibility. In fact, the most grounded people often seem strangely calm in the middle of chaos. Not because they've mastered life, but because they've stopped letting their mind write a scary story about every unknown. They know the truth. Worry is just the mind trying to write a script it was never meant to control. And ironically, when you stop obsessing about what might happen, you finally have the space to focus on what's happening. That's where growth is. That's where alignment begins. You start handling things as they come, not as you feared they would be. You make better decisions because fear isn't fogging your mind. You take better care of yourself because you're not drained by mental chaos. You show up differently in your relationships because you're not stuck in loops of doubt, guilt, and what-ifs. Worry lives in imaginary futures. Peace lives in the now. And the moment you taste that kind of peace, even in small doses, you realize something important. Nothing outside of you changed. You did. And the world began responding to that. There's a quiet superpower most people don't even know they have. The ability to let things stay unresolved. To move without every answer. To live without immediate closure. Because life isn't a perfect script. It unfolds in layers, in pauses, in surprises. And sometimes the wisest thing you can do is wait without worry. That's hard when your mind has been trained to fill silence with panic. But once you notice that urge, the urge to fix, predict, control, you can question it. Why am I rushing? What am I afraid of if I stay here a little longer? Who told me peace only comes after everything is solved? Worry tries to convince you that peace is something you earn when life cooperates. But that's a trap. If you're waiting for everything to be perfect before you breathe, you'll hold your breath for the rest of your life. Real peace doesn't come from controlling circumstances. It comes from unhooking your emotional state from them. From choosing presence, even in uncertainty. From sitting with life when it's unfinished, messy, unresolved, and not letting it take your center. And that's when everything shifts. Because when worry lets go, you get your energy back, your creativity, your sense of direction. Life feels smoother, not because you're lucky, but because you've stopped fighting it. The situations look the same, but you feel different inside them. Grounded, clear, less desperate for answers, more open to possibilities. That's when things fall into place, not because you forced them, but because you finally stopped pushing and started trusting your own stillness. Most people never question why their mind is always busy. They assume it's normal, like background noise. But here's the truth. A noisy mind isn't a strong mind. It's a mind stuck in survival mode. We've normalized anxiety as ambition. We've confused restlessness with productivity. We've come to believe that if we're not constantly thinking, something's wrong. But overthinking doesn't mean you're evolving. It usually means your nervous system is stuck in overdrive, replaying old fears under new disguises. Here's the truth. Worrying feels like participation in life, but really it keeps you on the sidelines, micromanaging every possible outcome in your head while real moments pass you by. You miss sunsets because you're thinking about your to-do list. You miss connection because you're planning your response instead of listening. You're in the room, but not really there. But when you start pulling back, not by force but by awareness, everything begins to change. You catch yourself mid-spiral, and instead of feeding it, you breathe. You remind yourself, this isn't happening now. This is just a story my mind is writing, and I can close this chapter anytime. That's when you return to your body. You feel your breath, your feet on the floor, your chest loosening when you stop fueling the panic. You start living your life, not as a character trying to survive the plot, but as the author choosing how the story unfolds. You realize you can't worry your way into peace, but you can choose peace right now, not as a final destination, but as a choice you make over and over. And the more you make it, the stronger that muscle gets, the easier it becomes to return to yourself no matter how loud the world gets. But here's the shift. When you catch yourself spiraling and pause instead of feeding it, everything changes. You retrain your nervous system. You show your body what safety feels like, even when life isn't perfect. You realize safety isn't something you find someday. It's something you create by not treating uncertainty like a threat. You stop mistaking thoughts for facts. Just because a fear appears doesn't make it true. Just because something is possible doesn't mean it deserves your peace. And this doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care wisely. You protect your energy like it matters, because it does. You treat your focus like a rare resource, because it is. You stop giving the loudest thought in your head all your attention and start listening for the quiet one, the one that whispers, "It's okay not to know yet. You're safe right now." And when you live from that space, something powerful happens. Your intuition gets louder. You start sensing what's right for you without overthinking every detail. You make choices without waiting for everyone's approval. You let go of timelines and start trusting timing. The world won't slow down, but you will. And in that stillness, you find strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be unshakable. You know what's rare today? A quiet mind, not because everything is perfect, but because it's no longer at war with itself. That kind of peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from releasing the weight you were never meant to carry. Because most of what makes life feel heavy isn't yours. It's the stories, assumptions, rehearsed disasters, imaginary conversations, invisible standards you never agreed to. And all of that, you can let it go. You don't need to solve everything before you can breathe. You don't need to predict every outcome before you can rest. You just need to notice when your mind drags you into fear and choose not to follow every time. This isn't about being passive. It's about loosening your grip, walking through life open, not armored, present, not panicked, because life responds differently when your energy shifts. People feel it, you feel it, and it's not magic. It's just you, finally showing up as yourself, not the future version, not the overcalculated version, but the version that trusts that whatever comes, you'll meet it when it comes, not a moment sooner. And maybe, just maybe, everything starts to feel easier. Not because life changed, but because you stopped making it harder than it needed to be. If this message hit at the right moment, like, comment, and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but to keep your energy aligned with what truly serves you. You're not here to worry your way through life. You're here to live it. Let's do that together.